Today I am comparing Assassin's Creed Black Flag on the PlayStation 4 and the Potato Masher. The Potato Masher is a $350 PC custom built in December of 2014 and designed to compete against the PlayStation 4 for the rest of its life cycle. If you want any more information about the Potato Masher, check the description of this video for links to the main build video and more information. Also, there is a full 1080p download link in the description of this video if you want to pixel peep, and portions of this video are in 60 FPS, so if you're watching this on YouTube, please switch over to the 60 FPS option if your internet will allow you to. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is a pretty decent PC port and has a lot of graphical options. Now, the most varied of these is the anti-aliasing, which if you don't know what that does, it kind of fixes the jaggies you see on screen sometime. Now, if you look here, I'm going to do a comparison on one corner of the frame. Right now, there's no anti-aliasing. Now, here's FXAA. Keep watching the frame rate counter, upper left-hand corner. SMAA, see the frame rate's going down just a little bit. MSAA, it's going down quite a bit more. This is pretty taxing on your system. Then CSAA, it drops a lot, and the picture is also starting to look pretty soft. And when the CSAA goes up to 8x, personally, I think the performance drop here is just ridiculous considering how soft the picture is. Now, TXAA is an NVIDIA specific thing. I don't think it looks that great. Now, if you upsample to 1440p using NVIDIA Dynamic Super Resolution, you can run with no anti-aliasing and a better frame rate. Now, of course, this is all on very high, so the frame rate's still not great, which you can see when you go up to 4K, because there's no anti-aliasing, everything looks great, no aliasing issues, but the frame rate is really bad. Now, by comparison, here is 1080p with no anti-aliasing once again, and with FXAA, which I think you should leave on because there's almost no performance hit when you're using it. Now on to the rest of the graphics. First things first, on the PC you are going to notice a little screen tearing at first. I ran without VSync on just to see what type of frame rates the game was capable of on the highest graphics settings. So you are going to see some of that, but I do switch VSync on pretty soon and you won't notice any more screen tearing. Now, Assassin's Creed Black Flag originally ran at 900p on the PlayStation 4 and received a patch bumping it up to 1080p shortly after launch. And it overall looks pretty good, although it does seem to have a little bit of overzealous FXAA, which tends to sharpen everything. And if you compare the PS4 footage to the Potato Masher footage, it almost makes the Potato Masher look a little soft. When you're playing it, that's definitely not the case. And to me, the PlayStation 4 version looks overly sharp, and it actually makes the game look a little bit worse. I mean, overall, the textures, the models, everything is great on the PlayStation 4 version. It doesn't really have many faults except for the frame rate and the over sharpening, and I'll get to the frame rate in a bit. And also, the PlayStation 4 version appears to be a little undersaturated compared to the PC. Part of that might be because the Potato Masher has a little bit better shadows, a little bit better render distance, a little more volumetric fog, things like that. I can't tell if those contribute to making everything look a little smoother and a little more vibrant, or if it's just little subtle differences in the way the graphics technology renders everything out. That isn't to say the PlayStation 4 version looks bad. Again, it really doesn't look bad. It noticeably has shorter waves, slightly less complex reflections, things like that, but it's not stuff you're really going to notice a ton while you're playing the game. The only thing that really stands out for me is the weaker lighting, weaker shadows, and the over sharpening. And of course, the frame rate. Now, it would be easy to assume that the reason that Assassin's Creed Black Flag originally debuted at 900p on the PlayStation 4 is that the team was having a hard time reaching 1080p at playable frame rates, and so they decided to hold the game back until they could optimize it further. That's not bad, and I'm glad they did that, and it's always nice when your game runs at good frame rates, but Black Flag doesn't always run that great on the PlayStation 4. It runs good most of the time, but you are going to notice some frame rate drops. Sometimes it seems like it dips into the mid-20s, especially around large crowds or larger areas of the game. Again, it's very far from unplayable, but it is noticeably lower than the locked 30 FPS that the Potato Masher is easily capable of. Now, the Potato Masher very, very easily locked the frame rate at 30 FPS with everything turned all the way up except anti-aliasing for the reasons we talked about earlier. Now, the VSync on Black Flag is a little bit interesting. If the frame rate dips below 60 for any measurable amount of time, like 2 or 3 seconds, the game will actually throttle the VSync back down to 30 FPS. So you're pretty much going to be running at 60 locked, 30 locked, or running without VSync. This kind of sucks on the Potato Masher because the game is capable of running at 60 FPS with everything on the highest settings most of the time. but it does have dips. Probably every 10 or 20 seconds it'll dip down 3 or 4 frames. Honestly, not that bad, especially considering how good the game looks, but when this happens, the game will usually throttle back to 30 and then you're stuck there. So if you want a game at 60 FPS all the time, you either need to run without VSync, which then introduces screen tearing, or you need to turn the settings down. Here is the game locked running at 30 FPS, everything on the highest settings. And here it is running with everything on the lowest settings to achieve a nice 60 plus FPS. Now fortunately the game still looks good at the lowest settings, but it doesn't look as good as Ultra, and it does kind of suck that you can't run everything with a little more permissive VSync. Interestingly, if you turn the settings all the way down to 720p and the absolute lowest graphics options, the game still doesn't run any faster than about 63 FPS, which is the highest frame rate I saw. Now switching to 720p broke my frame rate counter when I recorded this clip, but trust me, the game is not running any faster than 63 FPS, which would appear to be something hard-coded into the game or some extreme hardware optimization issue. And you might be wondering, well, why not just play the game at 30 FPS? Why does 60 FPS matter? Well, I agree for mini games, 30 FPS usually looks fine, but for certain types of games, namely shooters, racing games, and some action games like Assassin's Creed, 60 FPS makes a big difference. Now, this is PlayStation 4 footage, and you might be looking at it and thinking, well, this looks great, there's nothing wrong with this combat, this is smooth, this looks good. And you're right, it does look good. But let's watch the same fight again with this footage sitting next to 60 FPS footage from the Potato Masher, so make sure you're watching this at 60 FPS on YouTube. Now, other than being cropped, this footage is not touched in any other way. If you notice, the 60 FPS footage looks a lot different than when I normally have 60 FPS footage. It's because I normally capture at 30 FPS, even if the game is running at 60, and here I'm using NVIDIA's Shadowplay to capture a full 60 FPS clip. To me, the 60 FPS battles look much more fluid, much more violent, and honestly a lot more exciting. Now, if the 30 looks fine to you and your system can't run the game at 60, that's no problem. Enjoy it at 30. It's still a good game. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but as I'm sure you can see, if you've got the juice, 60 FPS looks fantastic. It's not just fights. Running and jumping off roofs and everything else you do in Assassin's Creed also looks better in 60 FPS. Everything just feels more fluid. I felt like I was landing jumps more naturally, and it again just looked really, really good. And once again, this isn't to say you can't have fun at 30 FPS, but if you can play at 60, play at 60. 60's great. Personally, I'd rather run the game on low settings because it still looks great and have 60 FPS. And now, to just further hammer the point home, here's a fight played at half speed. It looks pretty. Alright, now here's the game running at 1080p on the PlayStation 4, and it looks very good. Here's the game running at very low settings at 1440p on the Potato Masher. It can't lock at 60 FPS on very low settings, but you can turn the settings all the way up except for FXAA and the game will lock at 30 FPS at 1440p, and you can actually play it really well. The game is awesome at 1440p, of course ignoring the issues we just talked about with 60 versus 30 FPS. If you're going to be playing at 30 anyway, 1440p actually is not much of a drag on your system because the game really won't run faster than 60 and really seems to like running at 30. And 4K is even possible on very low settings at 30 plus FPS. I don't have VSync on here just to see the maximum frame rate the game could achieve. And here I am running around VSynced 30 FPS, although you see the frame rate does actually spike up a little bit, which is very interesting because I definitely had VSync on. But the game is totally playable at 4K. Now, as you can see, the reflections and stuff in the water aren't that great, but hey, you can still play it. And just for grins, here's the game running at 4K with everything all the way up except for anti-aliasing. The frame rate counter broke when I did this, but it can't be running faster than like 15 or 20 FPS. It's not running great at all, but I just figured you'd like to see what it looked like with everything turned all the way up. In my opinion, Assassin's Creed Black Flag is a much better Assassin's Creed game than the one that came out this year, Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is really fun. You can just play it as a pirate if you don't want to play the storyline, and the gameplay mechanics really work. To top it off, the game actually worked decently well on release and was patched to run extremely well, a far cry from the issues that Unity is still having at the time I'm making this video. I highly recommend running the game at Ultra without VSync because then you can run things at 60 FPS almost all the time, and you can put up with a tiny bit of screen tearing and a tiny bit of frame rate drops. If you were really bothered by screen tearing, go ahead and run the game at 30. It still looks great and still runs great. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out the description of the video for more information about the potato masher, and have a great day.